A girl, a flyer, and 3 officers who crossed the line. But they never expected who would step in. Watch to the end. It's not what you think. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. The sun had just begun to climb above the city skyline, casting golden reflections across the wide glass windows of a modest corner cafe tucked away from the noise of downtown Los Angeles. Inside, the atmosphere was quiet and relaxed. The morning rush hadn't yet begun, and the scent of fresh coffee and sizzling eggs lingered in the air. Seated by the window, half hidden beneath the shade of a baseball cap, sat 2 large men in casual wear. One wore a gray hoodie, the other a simple white t-shirt. Despite their size and presence, they attracted no special attention. That was how they wanted it. No cameras, no questions, just breakfast. John Cena leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth as he picked up his fork. "You ever notice," he said, gesturing toward his plate, "the smallest, quietest diners have the best food?" Across from him, Dwayne Johnson chuckled and nodded. "You only think that because this place hasn't plastered your face on the wall yet." They both laughed softly, enjoying the rare peace. No shouting fans, no film crews, just the gentle clink of silverware and low music playing from a small radio behind the counter. But outside, something caught their attention. Across the street, standing confidently at the edge of the sidewalk, was a young black girl, no more than 13. She wore a bright yellow t-shirt with the words, "Help us save them," printed across the front, and clutched a stack of colorful flyers in her small hands. Her name was Aaliyah. She was standing there alone, handing out flyers with a gentle smile to each passerby, some of whom ignored her, others accepting the paper with a nod or a thank you. Each time someone reached for a flyer, her smile brightened, her energy unwavering. John watched her for a moment, leaning his elbow on the table. "Kids out here working harder than half the people we know," he muttered. Dwayne followed his gaze and nodded thoughtfully. "That's heart right there. No one forced her to do this. You can see it. She believes in it." Aaliyah wasn't there for school credit or as part of a group assignment. Her mother ran a struggling animal shelter in South LA, and the flyers she passed out were their last hope. Donations had dropped after the city cut funding. She was determined to help, any way she could. Across the street, 3 uniformed LAPD officers stood near a street light. Their names were O'Malley, Dobson, and Keller. 3 white officers in their 40s who'd grown bitter and bored with years of uneventful patrols. They weren't interested in animal shelters or in kids doing good. To them, a black child standing alone on the corner was reason enough to suspect something else. "Look at this," O'Malley said, sneering as he nodded toward Aaliyah. "Another one of them out here with her little scam flyers, probably selling weed rolled up in those things." Keller smirked. "Or looking for her dealer." Dobson chuckled darkly. "This block's turning into the goddamn jungle. Let's clean it up a bit, huh?" They started crossing the street, heavy boots hitting pavement. Aaliyah saw them coming, but she didn't react. She'd learned to be polite, to stay calm, to show respect, even if she didn't always receive it in return. "Good morning, officers," she said brightly, offering one of her flyers with a warm smile. O'Malley stopped inches from her. He didn't take the flyer. Instead, he slapped it out of her hand. It fluttered to the ground. "You think this is a joke, little girl?" he said harshly. "What the hell do you think you're doing here?" Aaliyah blinked, taken aback. "I'm handing out flyers, sir. It's for an animal shelter. My mom—" "I don't care what your mom does," Dobson interrupted. "You're loitering. That's illegal here." "It's not loitering if she's moving and handing things out," said a passing woman, slowing down. "Move along, lady," Keller snapped. "This doesn't concern you." John and Dwayne were still watching from the window. The laughter was gone. John's jaw clenched. Outside, O'Malley leaned closer to Aaliyah. "You got drugs in that bag, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice low and mocking. "Or maybe under your shirt?" Aaliyah stiffened. "I don't use drugs. I don't sell them. I'm just trying to help animals." "Don't give me that crap," Keller cut in. "You people always say that. Then we find crack in your shoe." "You people?" Aaliyah echoed, stunned. "Yeah," Dobson sneered. "Little black girls in neighborhoods you don't belong in. You think we don't know what you're up to?" "I live here," she cried out. "Shut your mouth and show us your pockets," O'Malley demanded. "Or maybe take off that shirt. We'll see where you're hiding it." Tears welled up in her eyes. She stepped back. "You can't make me do that. I know my rights." "Oh, you know your rights?" Keller mocked. "Then you should know not to sass an officer. You're resisting now." Before she could move, O'Malley grabbed her by the shoulder and twisted her arm behind her back. She screamed in pain. That was the moment John Cena stood up. Inside the cafe, chairs scraped. Dwayne placed a few bills on the table without a word. They moved in unison, quiet and deadly focused. When they stepped out the door, the heat of the sun hit them, but the fire in their eyes burned hotter. "Let her go!" John's voice rang out like a gunshot. The officers froze. People on the sidewalk turned. Phones lifted into the air. O'Malley turned, lips curled. "Excuse me?" "You heard him," Dwayne added, stepping forward. "Let her go now." Keller laughed. "Look who it is. Hollywood's finest. You two filming another pretend cop movie?" John didn't smile. "No, just real men doing what actual cops should." O'Malley pulled the girl tighter. "This is police business. Back off." John clenched his fists. "Hurting a 13-year-old isn't police work. It's cowardice." Dwayne took a slow step forward. "You three want to fight. Pick someone your own size. But first, let the kid go." The standoff thickened like smoke in the air. And just like that, the situation was no longer under the control of the police. Aaliyah's small frame trembled beneath the tight grip of Officer O'Malley's hand. Her arm was twisted uncomfortably behind her back, and her face contorted in pain. But she didn't cry. Not yet. Her eyes darted from one officer to the next, searching for any trace of humanity. But all she saw was power cloaked in cruelty. The sidewalk around them had grown quiet. Conversations had died out, and the few people still lingering kept their distance, wary and unsure. Phones in their hands, but hearts frozen in hesitation. John Cena stepped forward slowly, his massive build casting a shadow over the three officers. His voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "You need to release her arm right now." O'Malley squinted up at him. "You think you're in a ring, Cena? This is the real world. We enforce the law." Dwayne stood beside John, his expression unreadable, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "You call this law enforcement?" he asked, nodding toward Aaliyah. "You're manhandling a child on the street in broad daylight for passing out flyers." Dobson laughed, an ugly sound that rang false. "Let me guess. You two are going to lecture us on civil rights now? Give me a break." "She resisted," Keller added, stepping closer. "Didn't follow instructions. That's cause enough to detain her." John took another step forward. "You told her to strip, to empty her pockets. You mocked her race. You assaulted her. That's not detainment. That's abuse of power. That's racism." O'Malley scoffed. "You don't know what it's like on these streets. You think because you make a few movies and throw some charity money around that you understand how things work." Dwayne's eyes narrowed. We understand that this is a scared 13-year-old girl who just wants to help animals. We understand you're 3 grown men who decided to humiliate her in public because she's black." O'Malley, still holding Aaliyah, sneered. "You know how many times we found junk in flyers like this? Her kind doesn't come out here for charity. She's casing storefronts, maybe scouting for someone." "I'm not a criminal," Aaliyah gasped through clenched teeth. "I'm just trying to help my mom's shelter. Please." John took one more step. "Let her go." The tension was suffocating. People around them had formed a loose circle, their phones now recording clearly. Whispers passed through the crowd. "That's John Cena, right? And The Rock? Oh my God, they're confronting the cops." O'Malley seemed to weigh his options. His grip loosened slightly, but then he made the worst decision of his career. He shoved Aaliyah forward, causing her to stumble onto her knees. "Fine," he said with mock generosity. "You want her? Take her. Let her be your little mascot." Dwayne instantly moved to Aaliyah, helping her to her feet gently. She clutched his arm, her eyes wide and fearful. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, trembling. "My arm hurts." Behind them, Keller stepped forward, his voice low and filled with venom. "You celebrities think you're untouchable. You're not. You step into our business again, and you'll find out exactly what it means to interfere with police operations." "That wasn't policing," John snapped. "That was harassment, and everyone here saw it." "Yeah?" Dobson barked. "You think these people care? They'll post their little videos, cry about justice, and move on tomorrow. You two? You'll go back to your mansions, but we'll still be out here dealing with trash." "Then maybe you shouldn't be out here at all," Dwayne said coldly. Keller laughed. "We're the law here, not you, and not her." O'Malley suddenly reached for his taser. "Back the hell up," he barked. "This ends now." In the blink of an eye, John's hand shot out and grabbed the taser mid-draw. With a swift twist, he wrenched it from O'Malley's grip and sent him stumbling backward. In the same fluid motion, he flung the taser across the sidewalk, out of reach. Keller lunged, but Dwayne intercepted him with a powerful shove that sent him crashing into a bench. Dobson reached for his baton, but before he could raise it, John moved forward and disarmed him with brutal efficiency. The crowd erupted, not in fear, but in cheers. Someone shouted, "World Star!" Another, "It's all on camera. We got everything." The 3 officers, humiliated and disarmed, backed away, panting, red-faced and furious. "You're finished," O'Malley hissed. "You attacked police officers." "You attacked a child," Dwayne replied, steady and calm. John turned to the gathered crowd, raising his voice. "Did anyone see these officers threaten this girl? Did anyone record it?" A chorus of voices answered. "We got it. Everything from the start. My live stream's still running." Aaliyah stood between them now, holding Dwayne's hand tightly. Her arm throbbed, but she stood tall. A woman from the crowd stepped forward, a middle-aged black woman with glasses and a legal pad clutched under her arm. "I'm a civil rights attorney," she said firmly. "This girl will not be left alone. If these men aren't immediately suspended, I will personally take this to court." The crowd applauded. The 3 officers backed off, their confidence melting as they realized the power had shifted. Sirens sounded in the distance. Another patrol car pulled up, this one with 2 younger officers, a man and a woman. They quickly assessed the situation, eyes wide as they recognized who was involved. "Is everyone okay here?" the female officer asked cautiously. "No," Dwayne said, "but we're getting there." Aaliyah looked up at John and Dwayne. "Thank you," she said softly. "I didn't think anyone would stop them." John crouched beside her. "You matter. No one ever has a right to treat you like that." Dwayne added, "And trust me, this isn't over yet. The world's going to hear your story." They stood shoulder to shoulder, a wall of protection between Aaliyah and the cowards who had tried to break her. The sirens that had once seemed so distant now screamed to a halt at the curb, cutting through the heavy tension left hanging in the air. A second police cruiser arrived, followed by a black unmarked car with tinted windows. Doors opened quickly, and 4 new officers stepped out. 2 white, 1 Latino, and 1 black, accompanied by a plainclothes sergeant who looked like he hadn't had a peaceful morning in years. The man in charge was Sergeant Harold Finch, a wiry figure with sharp eyes that scanned the crowd before locking on to the 3 disgraced officers still reeling from their failed intimidation. John Cena stood calmly beside Dwayne and Aaliyah as the new officers approached. The crowd was growing. Phones were still recording. Murmurs turned into chatter. Dozens of people had seen what happened. Dozens more would soon watch it online. Sergeant Finch moved directly to Aaliyah first, kneeling slightly. "You okay, young lady?" he asked, his voice steady, deliberate. Aaliyah looked up at him uncertain. Her voice was small. "My arm hurts." He twisted it. Finch's eyes flicked to O'Malley, who instinctively straightened up and tried to look composed. "She resisted," O'Malley muttered. "We had reason to suspect." "Don't," Finch said sharply, holding up a hand. "Don't finish that sentence unless you want your badge on my desk by the time I'm done speaking." The crowd reacted with hushed approval. Even some of the newly arrived officers glanced at each other, sensing the power shift. Finch turned toward John and Dwayne. "I'm aware of who you are," he said plainly. "I also know that when men like you get involved, there's usually a damn good reason." "We didn't come here to be involved," Dwayne replied, "but when we saw what was happening to her, we couldn't sit and do nothing." "She was handing out flyers for her mom's animal shelter," John added, "and your officers treated her like a criminal." Finch looked down at the flyers on the ground. One had landed face up, a picture of a rescued kitten with the words, "Give them a second chance." Finch's jaw clenched. He turned to the 3 officers who were now shifting uncomfortably. "Until I complete a full internal investigation, all 3 of you are relieved of duty. Hand over your weapons and badges." O'Malley opened his mouth, but the sergeant cut him off. "No debates, no explanations. This department has enough stains on its name already. I won't add a child's bruised wrist and a public disgrace to the list." One by one, the 3 officers slowly unholstered their weapons and removed their badges. As O'Malley handed his over, his hand trembled with anger, his eyes burning with humiliation. "You're gonna regret this," he hissed toward John and Dwayne. "You're turning this city into a circus." "No," John said calmly. "You already did that. We're just turning on the lights." As the crowd watched, the 3 officers were escorted to the black unmarked car. The moment the doors slammed behind them, an eruption of applause burst from the people surrounding the scene. Aaliyah flinched at first, unused to such attention, but Dwayne gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You stood your ground," he said. "You didn't deserve what happened, but you were brave." A few reporters had arrived by now. One of them stepped forward with a microphone and a cameraman in tow. "Mr. Cena, Mr. Johnson, can we get a quick word?" Dwayne looked down at Aaliyah, then nodded toward the reporter. "Talk to her. This is her story, not ours." Aaliyah looked shocked. Me? Yes, John said. You have a voice. Use it. The reporter crouched down beside her, holding out the microphone. Sweetheart, would you like to share what happened? Aaliyah looked around at the sea of faces, cameras, flashing phones. Then she took a breath. I was just trying to help the animals at our shelter, she said, her voice a little shaky. My mom works there. We rescue dogs and cats and try to give them homes. I made the flyers myself. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't loud. I wasn't asking for money. I was just trying to be kind. The reporter's voice caught slightly as she responded. And then they came, the police. They said I was doing something illegal, that I was selling drugs. One of them told me to take off my shirt. I told them I wasn't doing anything wrong. I tried to walk away, but he grabbed me. He twisted my arm. I was scared. The crowd grew completely silent. I didn't think anyone would help me, Aaliyah continued, tears now running down her cheeks. But they did. They saw me. She turned and looked up at John and Dwayne. They made me feel safe again. The reporter stood up, her eyes misty. Thank you for telling your story. More news crews began to arrive. Police set up a perimeter, but didn't interfere. The footage was already being uploaded and shared. Across social media, the scene began trending under hashtags like #JusticeForAliyah and #RealHeroesStepUp. Later, as the street slowly cleared and the crowd dispersed, John and Dwayne stayed behind with Aaliyah and her mother, who had come rushing to the scene after a call from one of the officers. She embraced her daughter fiercely, eyes filled with gratitude and anger. I was terrified something would happen to her, the mother said, her voice breaking. You raised a fighter, John told her. She stood tall. And we'll make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug, Dwayne added. No one's walking away from this without accountability. As they prepared to leave, a young officer approached with a folder in hand. We took the names of every witness who offered video. They're willing to cooperate, and Sergeant Finch is already drafting the report. Aaliyah looked up at them one last time before they turned to go. Do you think things will change now? She asked softly. John crouched beside her. They can, if people like you keep speaking up. Dwayne added, and if people like us don't stop standing beside you. The three of them stood in the middle of the sidewalk where it had all started, where fear had ruled the moment, where silence had nearly won. But not today. Today, justice had spoken back. The footage spread faster than anyone anticipated. Within hours, the video of Aaliyah's encounter with the three officers was shared on every major social media platform, accompanied by hashtags that now echoed far beyond the streets of Los Angeles. #JusticeForAliyah. #RealHeroesStepUp. #End Racial Profiling. Clips of John Cena and Dwayne Johnson confronting the officers went viral, drawing millions of views. Journalists, activists, and celebrities shared their outrage, and within a day, the incident dominated headlines across the country. That evening, in a small community center in South Central, Aaliyah sat quietly with her mother in a folding chair, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and volunteers from the animal shelter. Her right arm was bandaged and tender, but she didn't complain. The room was filled with voices of support, people bringing food, pet supplies, and even small envelopes of donations. Her story had touched something deep. John and Dwayne arrived quietly, dressed just as they had been that morning, still avoiding cameras and interviews. They weren't there to pose for photos or receive praise. They were there because they believed this wasn't over. As they stepped into the room, the crowd applauded. Aaliyah's eyes lit up. She stood carefully and approached them. "You came," she said. "We told you we would," John replied, offering her a gentle smile. A volunteer approached with a clipboard. "We've received over $4,000 in donations today alone. There's a reporter from Channel 9 outside, but we told them this isn't a press event. That okay?" Dwayne nodded. "That's perfect. This is her space, not theirs." Aaliyah's mother stood beside her daughter, watching the men who had protected her child like family. "I can't thank you enough," she said. "They could have ruined her. That moment, it could have left a scar forever." Dwayne looked down at Aaliyah. "It still might, but now she knows she's not alone." The moment was warm, but reality loomed just outside the doors, because not everyone was celebrating. In the shadows of their temporary suspension, the three officers sat together in a private bar in East L.A. O'Malley drank heavily, his face flushed with anger. Keller scrolled through his phone bitterly, seeing his own face plastered on news sites with headlines branding him a racist and a thug. Dobson sat silently, staring at the counter, lost in thoughts that flickered between fear and resentment. "They made fools of us," O'Malley growled. "Those musclehead clowns humiliated us in front of half the damn city." Keller looked up. "It's not over. These people, they'll move on. Always do. A few tweets, some tears, and then poof, it's back to normal." "You think we're getting our badges back?" Dobson asked without looking up. "They'll cave," O'Malley muttered. "They always do. But next time, we make sure there aren't any cameras. No damn audience." Keller leaned back and smirked. "We'll wait. Let them play hero. Sooner or later, they'll make a mistake. And when they do, we'll be there." Back at the community center, the mood was the opposite. Uplifted. Hopeful, but not naive. John and Dwayne sat with Aaliyah and listened as her mother explained the struggles their shelter had faced. Overcrowded, underfunded, and nearly shut down twice. The city had never responded to their pleas. But now, people were listening. "You'll need protection," Dwayne said at one point. "What happened today exposed a pattern. If they were willing to go after her in public, imagine what they've done in silence." "We filed complaints before," her mother replied. "Nothing ever came of them." "This time will be different," John said. "We're going to make sure of it." Sergeant Finch kept his word. The very next day, he appeared on a local news broadcast confirming that the three officers were under formal investigation for misconduct, excessive force, and racially charged language while in uniform. He acknowledged the public outrage and promised transparency. His words were careful, but his tone was serious. He knew the world was watching. In the following days, more people came forward. Other residents who had experienced harassment by the same officers began to speak up. Stories emerged. Quiet, painful stories that had gone ignored for years. Mothers who had been pulled over and threatened. Teen boys accused of theft for walking down the wrong street. Business owners intimidated into silence. Aaliyah had become a symbol, and her story had become a spark. One morning, just 3 days after the incident, Aaliyah and her mother were invited to speak at a city council meeting. The chamber was full. Reporters lined the walls. John and Dwayne were there too, sitting toward the back, arms folded, eyes fixed on the front. Aaliyah walked to the podium slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked out at the crowd, took a breath, and began. "My name is Aaliyah Moore," she said, her voice echoing across the chamber. "I'm 13 years old. I live here. I love animals. I believe in helping, not hurting. I was raised to speak with kindness and respect, and last week I was treated like a criminal because of how I look." She paused, the silence heavy and reverent. "The officers who hurt me didn't ask questions. They didn't care what I was doing. They saw my skin and assumed I was dangerous. They mocked me, touched me without permission, and tried to make me feel like I was nothing. But I'm not nothing. I am someone. And what they did to me wasn't just wrong, it was illegal." Some people in the crowd began to clap, but she raised a hand to continue. "I'm not asking for attention. I'm asking for protection, for fairness, for change. Not just for me, but for everyone like me. We deserve to feel safe. We deserve to be seen for who we are, not who we're assumed to be." Her voice trembled slightly at the end, but her gaze stayed steady. The room stood and applauded. Outside the building, news crews swarmed, but John and Dwayne ushered Aaliyah and her mother through a side door to avoid the chaos. As they stepped into the daylight, Aaliyah turned to them once more. "Did I say the right things?" she asked. "You said everything," John replied, "and you said it perfectly." Dwayne added, "You didn't just speak, you changed the conversation." They walked together in silence for a moment, the city buzzing around them. The fight wasn't over, but the tide had shifted. The next morning, the city of Los Angeles felt different. In neighborhoods from South Central to downtown, people were talking. In barber shops and coffee shops, in buses and on sidewalks, everyone had an opinion about what had happened to the girl with the flyers and the two celebrities who had stepped in. Some were furious, others inspired, but no one was silent. The video of the confrontation had now reached national news. Talk shows replayed it with commentary. Editorials appeared in major newspapers. Aaliyah's name was being spoken in places she had never imagined, and her story had turned into something bigger than any of them could have expected. At the same time, city officials began feeling the weight of public scrutiny. Several council members were flooded with emails and phone calls. Some issued public statements condemning the behavior of the officers. Others, under pressure, distanced themselves completely. The mayor announced an emergency meeting with the chief of police and the city's civilian oversight board. There was no longer room to hide behind procedure. The people were watching. Inside the LAPD Internal Affairs Division, the three officers sat across from investigators. O'Malley stared down at the table, his jaw tight. Keller leaned back with his arms crossed as if daring someone to challenge him. Dobson looked the most nervous, sweat beading on his forehead as questions were fired their way. "So, let me get this straight," the lead investigator said, flipping through a file. "You approached a 13-year-old girl handing out flyers for an animal shelter. You accused her of selling narcotics. Then you demanded she undress. And when she refused, you physically restrained her. Is that accurate?" "She was acting suspicious," O'Malley muttered. "Loitering. We've seen this type of cover-up before." The investigator narrowed her eyes. "You mean black children passing out paper?" Keller scoffed. "This is a witch hunt. We followed standard procedure." "You'll have to forgive me," the investigator said coldly, "because according to 14 eyewitness statements, 3 live streams, and 2 full-length videos, your procedure included verbal assault, racial slurs, and excessive force on a child." Dobson shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't know people were filming." The room went quiet. The investigator closed the file and stared at them for a long moment. Exactly. Meanwhile, at the animal shelter, Aaliyah's mother stood beside her daughter as volunteers unloaded a truck filled with donated pet food, toys, and crates. The building was brighter than usual. Journalists no longer swarmed the front gate, and for a moment there was peace. But it wasn't normal. Not yet. Inside, John and Dwayne sat at a table with the civil rights attorney who had stepped forward at the scene. Her name was Carla Benton, and her presence was sharp and composed. "We have enough grounds for a federal civil rights lawsuit," she said, tapping a folder. "Not just against the individual officers, but potentially against the department, especially if any prior complaints resurface." "They will," Dwayne said. "We've already had people contacting us, other families, other kids." John nodded. "This isn't an isolated incident. This is systemic." Carla leaned forward. "Then we have to make sure this case becomes a blueprint. If we let it fade, nothing changes. But if we see it through, if we make it visible, it can shift policy." Aaliyah sat quietly nearby, petting a small dog curled up in her lap. She didn't fully understand everything being discussed, but she understood this much. Something bad had happened to her, and now it was being turned into something good. She looked up. "Will they be punished?" John looked at her with calm certainty. "One way or another." Outside the shelter, reporters waited. But inside the room, decisions were being made. Carla reached for her phone. "I'll contact the ACLU. They've already reached out. And I have a friend at the Department of Justice. If they get involved, this becomes more than just a headline." Dwayne leaned back in his chair. "Good, because headlines fade. We want results." That evening, Aaliyah's face appeared on a nationwide interview broadcast on one of the biggest news networks. She sat beside her mother in a calm studio setting, answering questions with grace and honesty. Her voice was soft but sure. She spoke of kindness, of courage, of how she believed people could do better. She never once asked for pity. The segment ended with footage from the shelter, puppies yelping, kittens playing, volunteers smiling. It was a counter-image to the violence, a reminder of what she had been trying to do that day. At the police precinct, Sergeant Finch read through the preliminary report. His brow was furrowed. A junior officer stood nervously by the door. "Sir," the officer said, "word is, Dobson wants to cooperate. He's considering a statement." Finch looked up slowly. "He talks. It means they're unraveling. That's good. But O'Malley's angry, talking about lawsuits, retaliation." Finch set the report down. "Then he hasn't learned a damn thing." In the following days, more testimonies came forward. One mother described how O'Malley had once threatened to arrest her 10-year-old for talking back. Another young man said he had been thrown to the ground by Dobson for skateboarding too close to a white-owned store. Complaints that had been buried or dismissed were now surfacing. Community leaders held forums. Legal groups organized. What began as a single act of injustice had triggered a wave. Back at the shelter, Aaliyah helped hang new flyers, now updated with bold text at the bottom: "Help animals, protect kids, demand justice." John smiled as he passed by the wall and saw it. "You're not just handing out flyers anymore," he said. "I'm handing out truth," Aaliyah replied. Later that night, as John and Dwayne prepared to leave the shelter, Aaliyah approached them one last time. She looked different now. Not older exactly, but more certain, more awake. "I want to keep speaking," she said, "not just about animals, about this, about what happened." "You should," Dwayne said, "and we'll help however we can." She nodded and hugged them both tightly. From that day on, the shelter wasn't just a shelter. It became a symbol, a gathering place, a stage for voices that had been ignored. And Aaliyah Moore, The girl with the flyers was now something else entirely. A force. 2 weeks after the incident, the city of Los Angeles was still buzzing. Aaliyah Moore's name was now part of a larger conversation about race, policing, and youth activism. The momentum hadn't died down. Instead, it had grown stronger, fueled by continuous media coverage, protests demanding reform, and a growing public call for accountability. What had started as one child's quiet effort to help a shelter had exposed a rot that reached far deeper than anyone expected. In the heart of the city, the courthouse steps became the stage for a press conference. Carla Benton stood confidently before rows of microphones flanked by John Cena, Dwayne Johnson, and Aaliyah and her mother. Behind them stood volunteers from the shelter, community activists, and legal advocates. Reporters packed the square. Helicopters hovered overhead. The city held its breath. "We are filing a federal civil rights lawsuit," Carla announced, her voice clear and commanding. "This is not just about one child or one incident. This is about a systemic failure that allowed officers to terrorize a minor in broad daylight and face no immediate consequences. That ends now." The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, but Carla continued undeterred. "Let this serve as a warning to every institution that believes it can overlook misconduct, sweep racism under the rug, or silence those who speak up. You will be challenged, you will be exposed, and justice will come for you." When she stepped back, Aaliyah stepped forward. She held no notes. Her voice trembled at first, but then steadied. "I didn't ask to be part of this. I didn't want to be hurt or scared, but I was. And now I know what silence can do. I'm not going to be silent anymore." Her mother embraced her as the crowd erupted in applause. Across town, the LAPD headquarters remained tense. The chief of police, under pressure from the mayor and several council members, addressed the department in a closed-door meeting. "The officers involved have disgraced the badge," he said. "Effective immediately, O'Malley, Keller, and Dobson are terminated. Their records will reflect their misconduct, and full cooperation will be given to federal investigators." Some officers nodded in solemn agreement. Others looked away uncomfortable with the reality that the thin blue line had cracked under the weight of a child's courage and a city's outrage. Meanwhile, at the animal shelter, things were changing. The building received funding from anonymous donors, city grants, and national nonprofits. New equipment arrived daily. Volunteers poured in from all corners of the city. Aaliyah was no longer just the girl with the flyers. She had become a symbol of bravery, strength, and the power of peaceful resistance. One afternoon, John and Dwayne returned to the shelter to find a surprise waiting. A mural had been painted on the side of the building. It showed Aaliyah holding out a flyer, while behind her stood dozens of animals, people young and old, and the silhouettes of John and Dwayne standing like guardians in the background. At the top were the words, "Hope has a name." Aaliyah gasped when she saw it. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened slightly in awe. "It's you," John said with a smile. "It's everything you stood for." "Everything we stood for," she replied. They walked inside where more changes were underway. A small classroom had been set up in one corner where kids from the neighborhood could come after school to learn about animals, empathy, and advocacy. The shelter was no longer just about rescuing pets. It was about rescuing people, too. That evening, the community held a candlelight vigil in front of the shelter. Hundreds came. Some brought pets, others held signs. Aaliyah spoke again, this time without fear. Her voice was steady and strong. "We all deserve to feel safe," she said. "We all deserve to be treated like we matter." I don't want to live in a city where being a kid with a dream makes you a target. I want to live in a place where people look out for each other, where strangers stand up for what's right even if they don't have to, and where kindness isn't seen as weakness." The crowd fell silent, taking in her words. Then candles were raised together, a sea of soft light filling the night. After the vigil, as the crowd slowly dispersed, John and Dwayne stood beside Aaliyah, watching the lights flicker in the darkness. She looked up at them, eyes glowing. "Will it last?" she asked. "The change?" John crouched beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Change doesn't happen in a day or a week, but what you started, that's real, and it'll keep going as long as people keep standing up." Dwayne added, "And as long as you keep speaking your truth, people will listen. You're stronger than most adults I know." She smiled, not because she was proud of what had happened, but because she knew she had faced something terrible and come out standing. Weeks passed, and the lawsuit gained traction. National organizations joined the fight. The Department of Justice announced a probe into discriminatory patterns within the LAPD. Other cities began reviewing their own policies inspired by the growing movement that had started with one girl and a stack of flyers. Aaliyah returned to school eventually. Some kids treated her like a hero. Others were just happy to see her smile again. Her teachers gave her space and encouragement. Her mother kept working at the shelter, which had become a hub of energy and transformation. One quiet afternoon, months later, Aaliyah sat at a table by the shelter window, a rescued kitten curled in her lap. She looked out at the street where it had all begun. A simple sidewalk, a flyer, and a choice someone made to stand up instead of walking away. And she smiled, because she knew that the world wasn't perfect, but it could be better, and that sometimes even the smallest voice could break through the loudest silence. What started with a flyer changed an entire city. If this story moved you, leave a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to see it. Together, we can make voices like Aaliyah's louder.